You know, today we're going to see that quilters are doing more than just piecing. They're actually making masterpieces.
Well, let's take a look.
Quilt Central is made possible in part by Bernina of America. Nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. Quilting Machines International, providing quilting machines and supplies for the world. Celtic of America, taking creativity to new heights with decorated threads, stabilizers, and books. American Professional Quilting Systems, hand-guided elegance. The American Quilter Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Paducah, McCracken County Convention and Visitors Bureau, Paducah, where no one is a stranger. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Welcome to Quilt Central, celebrating quilting in everyday living, with your hosts, Jane Donaldson and Donna Wilder.
I've always been fascinated with crazy quilts, and joining me today is Alice Kolb. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, Donna. How are you? I fell in love with crazy quilts several years ago whenever I had a Finder's Day in my local community. And among the stack of gorgeous quilts that came through the door were two crazy quilts. I had not really connected to crazy quilts prior to that time. And when the quilts were hung, they were so beautiful that I made an effort to white glove those quilts for the next 2 days.
What fun.
And so as I was looking at the crazy quilts, my direct connection to them was, my goodness, would this really adapt to the contemporary sewing machine?
Well, these are some antique examples, aren't they?
Yes, those little samples were some that I've just picked up in some antique stores, and they represent the way the 1800 quilts were done. And they basically are done on a foundation fabric, on a muslin backing, and they are pieced together in a very haphazard type fashion with a story usually behind each little patch. It was an old dress or an old quilt or something that connected to those
Good.
quilts.
Well, let me take these and we'll look at something that's new.
From those old quilts, I was inspired to try my version of an antique crazy quilt. So this little piece is one of the early pieces I did in the crazy quilt process. This quilt is quilted on a muslin background, and I just took a vast variety of scraps of fabric that I had around the house and built it into this quilt, and then used the machine techniques to create the stitches that ran across the different stitch lines and the imagery that focuses in the middle of each area. This is my dog, and then I took flower motifs out of the sewing machine. And then most of the beading and the buttons I actually put on by hand.
Oh, that's great. And I know you brought some other samples that we can take a look at because there are many different varieties that you can create with this. Tell me a little about this.
From that traditional look, it seemed appropriate to me to say what else could be done with the crazy quilt. So I decided to develop some theme samples, and this little quilt is done with the Japanese fabrics from when I was teaching over there a few years ago. And it's just the beautiful silks that are available in that market area.
That's great. This one is very intriguing.
This is done by one of my favorite people. This is done by Fran Patterson. And Fran approached the crazy quilt by using junk. These little pieces of netting and tulle that fall across this are actually onion covers and strawberry covers and things of that type. And so she just took a collection of eclectic materials and made her quilt.
Oh, it's beautiful. It certainly doesn't look like junk. I love this one. This has some wonderful old pieces in it as well, doesn't it?
This is an approach by using the good side of old embroidery.
Right.
Often you find embroidery in antique stores and one side is soiled or stained and it's really not usable. But there's something about the old embroidery that has a heartbeat to it. And many times it's a piece that belongs to a grandmother or great-grandmother. And so those pieces are integrated into the machine techniques as well.
Oh, they look wonderful. This one looks familiar.
Well, this is a small piece I did before I did the big quilt for the book cover. And this piece actually integrates 3 techniques of quilting. I used the 4-patch because so many quilters like just the simple 4-patch. I used applique, and then I took the crazy quilt and tied it together. Then I applied the beads by hand.
Okay. So there's a little bit of hand embellishment as well as that.
And this is actually a 3-patch. This actually has crazy quilt, 4-patch, and then the applique.
Well, let's take a look at the quilt itself, too. That is really lovely.
And I approached it with the idea that, you know, all of us love to stitch a variety of things, and so if you wish to integrate 2 or 3 different directions, well, you can.
Well, it looks good. Now, this one combines a little applique, too.
This is a folk art approach using some of the applique of traditional, simple cut flowers, and then the crazy patch in the middle.
Great. And this one is bright and colorful.
Well, I live on a ranch, and I have fallen in love with farm animals in the last 10 years. And so this is my version of chickens.
Great.
I don't actually have chickens on my ranch, so I just pretend.
You pretend. And this one uses the red work, which is popular.
Well, the little motifs that come in the sewing machine that are about a 32 or 40-inch millimeter, they're not very easy to use in a creative way, and so it seemed very logical to tie them into something like this.
And this one is wonderful with the colors.
Well, we in the Midwest and the South know the wildflowers of the country are so gorgeous in the spring, so that was inspired by the yellow wildflowers.
And this one is sort of black and white and red,
kind of an accented
turn
neutral.
it around so the A is there.
Just a little bit of an accented neutral, using some findings, old buttons, rickrack, things of that type.
And the last one,
this is done with upholstery scraps. A lot of times you have bits and pieces left from redoing a room, and so I approached it with that direction.
good. Well, how do we get started now? That's the important thing.
When you get started with Crazy Quilt, another thing that I really loved about the imagery of Crazy Quilt and falling in love with it is how simple the supplies are. They're basically things that you have around. So I took just a variety of scraps, and the scraps can be as fine as you want them to be. They can be wonderful silks, or they can truly be leftover dresses and leftover whatever. And so I took a variety of those, and depending on either the traditional antique look of Crazy Quilt, you can do a mix and match like this little grouping here, or you can focus on a theme where you really focus in on colors that are more coordinated.
And then you start with the foundation of the muslin again.
You start with the foundation of muslin. There are a few little steps in between that you can think about if you wish. For example, if you're working with silk fabrics or fabrics that are very slinky, you can stabilize them with a stabilizer first, fuse them to a background fabric, and then as you fuse them to the background fabric, you can just treat them as one piece of cloth.
And you can get these at the local Salvation Army or any of those.
These are just silk tie scraps that someone gave me, but you could, anything that's kind of slinky that needs a little support, you can give it support using a stabilizer. You can also put a lightweight quilt bag under the back of the quilt if you want to, and that sometimes changes the body just slightly. So from the colors that you select and the variety of fabrics that you select, simply work with a muslin background and cut a patch in a random uneven corner.
Right.
As you take that random piece and place it to the muslin, then continue patching until the patch looks solid and is totally matched up like that. Now what I decided to do as a machine technique was pin it to the muslin. By pinning it to the muslin, then I can straight stitch applique. And by straight stitch appliquing, I just use a small open toe sewing machine foot. And this foot is open so that when it sets on the machine, or the machine stitch sets on the fabric, I can see exactly where to go.
And why do you select that rather than your traditional sewing it and flipping it?
The flip and sew technique is also a method that can be used, but for machining, it's very, very simple to approach it from this direction because you don't get caught in a corner.
Oh, good.
You just start with either a center piece or a lower piece and build forward, and then you can do a continuous line straight stitch until you've completely covered the surface.
Good.
These little straight stitches, I work in a very neutral color. I work in either a gray or a taupe color. And I work with just lightweight cotton quality thread. And from straight stitching it, then I lay in the decorative stitches.
Oh, doesn't that look wonderful? And these are all the stitches on your machine?
There's a variety. You can go just one stitch. If you're working with an older machine and you don't have 400 stitches on a machine, you can work with just one feather stitch that is available on the machine.
Which is pretty popular in the antique pieces.
You find it in so many machines and the old quilts as well.
Good. And then when you make little blocks like this one you actually...
After you go this direction and have your piece done, of course it's not very attractive at this point with the straightness. The stitches are pretty, but you will find that there's not much finishing there, so you just finish it like a regular quilt. And so when you finish it like a regular quilt, you can create the size that you want and the illusion that you want.
Have some more stitches, is that?
Well, one of the things that I particularly like in working with Crazy Quilt is all the accessory connections to it. So there's a wide variety of threads that can be used, and the threads lend themselves to so many different looks. For example, these are some stitches that I worked up just to see how they would fit together. And I found that the lightweight threads, the cotton embroidery threads, are particularly effective for these compact stitches. And then the little satin stitches work as a good bridge to hold the stitches together.
Tell me about the vest that you have with you here.
The little vest is just a takeoff on the crazy quilt, but instead of it being a quilt, I created it on the muslin. But as I worked it from the muslin, then I cut it into an actual garment and created that for an invitational show that I was in.
And you can make pillows, and these are little bags that are sewing supplies. And I love this little stitch you did on the placemats here.
Well, this is a stitch using a heavy thread in the bobbin and also a heavy thread in the needle, and then you skew the tension. You make a very tight bobbin tension and a very loose needle tension.
And you do this on your better sewing machines rather than
This is probably better for the wide millimeter stitch machines.
Good. Well, Alice, thank you for sharing all these wonderful ideas.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
When you put that binding on a quilt, you're not quite finished. You still need a label, something that'll say when you made it, who was involved, any history behind it, and those are not readily available. It's hard to find a label. You usually have to hand make one, so you put that off. But what I do is I have about 20 different Celtic designs that look like little quilt labels, and I run them all on one big piece of cloth all at the same time. And then I put it on the shelf, so when I need a label, I just cut it off, and I use that one so that I can give the history of that quilt. So I'm going to run one of those. It's a continuous line, it's a true Celtic design, and you'll see just how easy these go. A true Celtic design, you go around it and around it more than one time, and it really isn't laid out symmetrical. The masters of Celtic designs really worked hard to figure these out, and they have a beauty of their own. The stitch regulators that are on these machines are really wonderful too, because if you have to slow down and speed up, they tell the motor just exactly how fast to go so that they can slow down and speed up also. And every stitch is exactly the same. There. Wasn't that quick and easy? If you need quilt labels, and you do if you're finishing your own quilts, be sure to run some ahead and put them on the shelf so that you can keep the history of that quilt and you don't have to do any more handwork. They're there when you need them.
My guest today is bringing her own special quilt show. Joining me is Aie Rossmann. Welcome, Aie.
I'm happy to be here.
How did you get started making these magnificent pieces?
Well, I've been quilting for about 6 years, and my friends like my quilts, and they asked for the patterns, and I would give my patterns away. And then my brother-in-law was the one who said I should be selling my patterns, so I started marketing. Business, yeah.
Well, he was very wise because your friends that got them were very lucky. Let's take a look. This is absolutely magnificent. Tell me a little bit about this one.
This quilt is called Birds of Paradise. This is machine applique and machine quilted. And I use the daisy stitches or the star stitches on the Bernina machine.
And then you freeform quilted the background here and used a variegated thread.
Yes, I did.
It's, do you make up your designs as you go? Or?
Yes, I do. I don't draw it out when I machine quilt, so I just do it.
And you use your fabric and ideas. Well, the one on the wall, how did you do this one?
This is also machine applique and machine quilted, and I use the buttonhole stitch.
How did you get that tiny little stitching on there?
You can actually reduce the stitch width and the length on the Bernina machine, so you can make it as small as you want.
Your colors are beautiful. And you look at nature, or how do you decide?
I just look for contrast when I applique.
It looks great. It really does. Now, this one has a lot of vibrant colors in it, and it looks a little different.
This is actually a Burmese design, this lotus pattern. And we use a lot of black backgrounds in Burma when we do tapestries. So,
Are you from Burma?
I am from Burma.
Well, that's great. I can see the influence of that in a lot of your work. It's wonderful. And this one you did by hand, is that
Yes,
correct?
I did.
It's beautiful.
Applique.
Let's take a look at the next one. This one I think is so special. And this one's called?
Zodiac. It's got 12 zodiac signs.
Just a little bit. And you created each one of these.
Yes, I did.
How did you think up the designs and the ideas for each one?
Well, I like sketching, and whenever I have ideas, I sketch in my sketchbook, and then I work from there.
Do you keep all of that reference material that you have when you create each one of your designs?
Yes, I
That's
do.
good.
Mhm.
And so you have the 12 months going around, and then in the center you have?
The spinning star.
It is magnificent. And here again you used, is that tiny, that's a smaller one of the star or daisy. It's beautiful. Well, you do like that stitch, yes. It works very well. And this is magnificent. And this one is called?
This is called Laurel, and this is machine applique and machine quilted. Sorry, hand applique.
Hand applique. Great. Now, which do you prefer, machine applique or hand applique?
I like handwork.
Do you?
Yes.
How that one we saw before, tell me again how long it took you to do that one?
The insomnia?
Yes.
It took me 1.5 months.
Amazing. Now this one you brought in another color combination, is that correct? And that one is done with the lighter background this time. And it looks, it looks different when you see, and you've used different proportions in the background as well. Very, very nice. And what do we have underneath here? Oops. And this one is called?
Lotus in Moonlight.
And here you've done some sort of sashiko quilting on there. How do you get your points and your curves to be so perfect?
Well, this is hand applique. When I hand applique, I use the needle turn method. I don't use freezer paper.
Okay.
I do use the template plastic to make templates from my designs. So I trace the design onto the template plastic.
Okay.
And then I cut it out without the seam allowance, like this. And then I would place it on to the right side of the fabric, and I would draw around the template with a marking pen or a pencil, and then I would pin it on the background fabric.
Okay. And I think I pulled your thread so that it's not too far into the needle. Good.
Fix that. And then I would start stitching from somewhere close to the point.
Okay.
Towards
the point.
Towards the point. And when I get to the point, I would take a secure stitch.
Now, she's using white thread, but normally you use the colored thread
That
to
would
match.
Yes.
But I said your stitches are so tiny, you could even use white because they don't show it all. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And now you take out your pins.
I take out my pins, and then I would open this up.
And this is crucial to really getting that point so perfect.
Yes, it is. And then trim the seam
Okay.
of the side that you have just stitched.
And then turn.
Turn. And when you get to this point, you pick it up with the needle,
Push it in.
push it in.
And you're ready to stitch on.
Yes, you're ready to stitch on.
Great.
So,
Now, you said there's one thing you do at the top once you get around to the top of the heart.
so what you'll do is you'll keep stitching all the way around, and you'll stitch right to the point
Yeah?
here,
Yes?
okay? And then, actually, you would want to clip
Right,
just before you get to the point, and then you stitch to the point. And when you get to the point, what you have to do is you have to remove the pins on this side, if you have pins, and then you have to fold the heart right in.
So that you get right to that edge.
Yes, you get right to that edge.
Take your last stitch and then...
Take your last stitch, yes.
And then continue around.
You pull this piece out again, and then you continue.
Well, you've done a magnificent job, and I want to thank you. And as I thank you, let's take a look at Water Lilies, another spectacular quilt.
The Yeiser Art Center in Paducah makes a significant impact on the cultural health of Western Kentucky. Exhibits, competitions, workshops, and educational activities nurture a vibrant community of artists. The center also boasts an impressive permanent collection, including 19th and 20th century American, European, African, and Asian works. Since its founding in 1957 by Mary Yeiser, the Art Center has presented over 500 exhibits, including a nationally recognized annual textile exhibit, Fantastic Fibers. Artists from all over enter this juried exhibition to be included in what has become one of the premier fiber art shows in the country. The works range from traditional quilt making to installations utilizing a variety of materials in most inventive ways. The Fantastic Fibers exhibit at the Yeiser Art Center is one of Paducah's and Kentucky's most interesting artistic events.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Jane.
I guess you've got some nice things that would be good in a toolbox.
Well, I brought a few items that every machine quilter, I believe, would need in their little tool bag. One would be a long screwdriver, which is nice, so you can get up above the machine and get your screws to your throat plate or your feed dogs. And it's nice to be out to work on your pressure feet and stuff to where you're not real close with your hands.
Yeah, I like that.
Then you got a little small screwdriver to make adjustments on your bobbin case or the hook or to replace your needles. Okay, then what we've got here, this is called emery cord. It's like sandpaper on a string to get those needle nicks or burrs off your needle plate. You can sand right into the hole all the way around, and it's great for your pressure feet also in those holes if you nick one or something. This is a new device called a bobbin case straightener. If you drop your bobbin case or you nick it with a needle, you can stick it right in there and turn it around. You can even tap around on it to get that back straight.
Well, that's a good idea.
Keep from having to buy new bobbin cases. This is a nice little oiler. It's got a little drop on it that goes right into the oil parts on the machines and things. This is emery paper, sandpaper. It comes by the foot. It's great to take the burrs or the nicks off your sewing hook, or this area right in here with the hook gib. This is a new cotton swab that's been designed just down the road from us.
That looks like it'd be handy.
Yes, we're great for getting in all those little tight spots and things. A magnifier is also useful to have in your tool bag so you can see the hooks or burrs, or if you're getting into the timing of the machine, there's a variety of gauges out now by all different manufacturers. That's a good little basics for your machine quilter's tool bag.
Thanks for watching this episode of Quilt Central, number 207, The Art of Quilting. Join us next time for Marriage, Mardi Gras style, quilting for a wedding with a twist. Quilt around the clock. Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program. Central is made possible in part by Bernina of America. Nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. Quilting Machines International, providing quilting machines and supplies for the world. Celtic of America, taking creativity to new heights with decorated threads, stabilizers, and books. American Professional Quilting Systems, hand-guided elegance. The American Quilters Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Paducah, McCracken County Convention and Visitors Bureau, Paducah, where no one is a stranger. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Celebrate quilting in your everyday living. To purchase videotapes of this or any episode of Quilt Central, you may call 1-866-PADUCAH.